8. How to remain awake. The most fundamental aspect of awakening is the shift in our understanding of who we are. Our culture, upbringing, and mind have all created a sense of me that is based on a thinking self. I think, therefore I am. Even when experiencing awake awareness, awareness energy, or open-hearted awareness, we have missed the point if we think that these experiences are cool meditation states and then return to our regular lives. These types of awareness are not states of mind. These are dimensions of our interconnected whole self. Shifting into self is not just an exercise of imagination or a psychological practice that our thinking parts do when we are in crisis or feel a need to care for our hurt child parts. Experiencing life through the eyes of our true self is our natural human potential. We take the first step on the path to awakening when we realize that we are a different self than we originally understood. When we taste this shift in identity, it is an aha moment. We feel like we have seen behind the veil of separation and understood something so crucial that we never forget it. We realize that we are so much more capable of love and more whole than we ever imagined. This initial shift can often be experienced as deep relief, letting go, or a sense of homecoming. From our shift of self, we are able to see how we are compassionate creators in the world, how we are lovable no matter what, and how our problems are held within something much larger. We are happier and more fulfilled than we could have imagined, because there is no conditionality to our well-being. We intimately feel how we are innately perfect and well. Once we directly experience this reality, even if just for a moment, we may feel changed at our core, although we have not changed into something new, but rather come into our true self that has been there the whole time. Once we experience a shift into self, something funny happens. Often, even if we think our realization will last forever, eventually we find ourselves back in a more contracted habitual experience of small self. While we may have thought that living from our awareness of our true self would easily continue, we come to realize that we need to go through an unfolding process for our awakening to abide as self-leadership. By abide, I mean a background to foreground shift, where open-hearted awareness remains primary and becomes where we are viewing and living from. Abiding is a dynamic, moment-to-moment unfolding within the ground of awake awareness that does not come and go. From the ultimate level of reality, we could say there is no process of abiding, no journey, and no path. The essential awake awareness is always present and does not change or develop. Awake awareness is already abiding, even when our human experiences are changing and passing away. The small self does not awaken, and the true self is not a stable entity or person. Awakening is simply a shift of view to look at the interconnected whole from open-hearted awareness. We have explored how there is no self, and yet this does not lead us to being robots or puppets of awake awareness. There is a play of yin-yang, Shakti-Shiva, divine human, transcendent immanent, which is a dance of formless awake awareness and our human form. I have met people who have had an initial waking up from small self, who get stuck in this first stage in the unfolding of full awakening. This is because initial waking up is not enough, and there is no one so evolved that they do not have to go through an unfolding process to live from an embodied, open-hearted awareness. As we awaken, we do not become perfect by any means, but we do have a wholly different way of knowing, being, and experiencing life than we did when we were identified with a smaller ego self. We can delve even deeper by examining what goes on during this stage of awakening into self-leadership. Why it is hard to remain in self-leadership. The first hint about why it is hard to remain in self-leadership is that the you that wants to remain awake is not you. The entire abiding experience will feel paradoxical to the thinking manager you, which will likely think that nothing on this path of awakening makes any sense. Indeed, the reason many people haven't yet awakened is because the small self is being run by their survival operating system and the expectations of our culture. Here is where a transitionally helpful spiritual ego, meditator, manager, or self-like part can be a trap if not recognized. This is where a wise teacher, like a good car mechanic who has been through the transitions from small self to self-leadership, can give pointers for maintenance of your self-driving vehicle and a tune-up to get you back on the road. At first, we may think that self is a part of us or a state, such as silence or stillness. But in order for self to remain primary, the place we view from rather than what we view, self must get to know itself. We must avoid being pulled into the mind by the old egoic structure and its defenses, which, for their own survival, are wanting to convince you that self is just a meditation state, so that they can remain in the driver's seat, a self-like part playing the role of self. How do we get to know self? First, we learn how to let go of the small self that is currently leading. We first need to get it out of the driver's seat so greater self can sit in it, even though it has been waiting in the background the whole time. The key in this effortless mindfulness approach is to shift immediately into the new operating system of awake awareness, rather than just deconstructing the small self. Awakening and stabilizing our awakening is as much a process of unlearning as learning. It is going to take effortless mindfulness to change the old habit of remaining in our small self and to learn to let go into open-hearted awareness, which sustains itself naturally. One student expressed this stage of moving from effort to effortlessness by saying, "Not knowing has been such a gift because it means that I can give up all the trying. I can give up wanting things to be a certain way and I can just let go. I can't express how free I feel in letting go of that striving. It is then that I notice a new knowing that is alert, safe, and wise. I don't have to go back to my thinking mind to try to confirm anything, and there is so much peace and freedom in that." The transition into don't know mind can feel like the moment we released our parents' hand when we were a kid on the first day of kindergarten. But here, as we move toward the unknown, toward the greater self, we are letting go of the ego identity's hand. We must learn to bear the arising of unpleasant messages from our ego managers that are yelling danger, from the repressed contents of our psyche, and from our protective parts and inner children calling out to be seen and processed. The danger signal at this stage is like a car alarm going off with no threat to the vehicle. Can we sit in the fire of these transitional moments? The key experience of this stage is a shift through the unknown into a new knowing of awake awareness. We can think about it like swinging on a rope that's hanging from a tree branch that reaches from the shore out over a lake. Letting go of the rope to jump into the water can be frightening because we relinquish control of our grip on safety. The water isn't like the land we left behind. But when we are in it, we'll find that it is a place that brings joy, refreshment, and a new kind of support. This is how it feels to transition from small separate self to interconnected whole self. We transition through the gap of not knowing for what can be a short or long period of time in our lives when we don't have an understanding of who we really are, what we're doing, or what we're here for. This natural part of the journey can feel scary, but we don't have to get stuck here, as we have learned early on to resource with the new operating system of awake awareness. The do's and don'ts of awakening. A main reason we experience so much unknown is that we are changing drivers in the vehicle that is our sense of self. In the past, we had a competent manager part that was on duty sitting in the driver's seat of our sense of self, vigilant about our experience, managing our choices, and analyzing things. Moving into living from self requires removing this manager from the driver's seat so that self can sit there. Self is not a new manager, but it does need to acknowledge and connect to the managers and functional parts of our body and mind. The small self's strongest survival programming is a series of 4 don'ts and 6 shoulds. Here are the 4 don'ts of the small self and the solutions from the interconnected self. 1. Don't go out of your mind. To find your ground of self, you need to go against your ego's strongest rules of survival. When you do, you end up realizing that it is sane for local awareness to go out of your small mind and discover the source of mind, awake awareness. 2. Don't become nobody. As you follow your intention of living as your true self and let go into the unknown, you will go through a sense of becoming nobody. Don't worry, this is normal. In this phase, you're not becoming a blank slate or a robot. You are simply not feeling like the somebody you thought you were. As you move through the gap of nobody into awake awareness, you'll increasingly start to feel the ground of yourself. 3. Don't lose control. The old identity has to lose control and release, let go, or surrender for a moment in order for the new ground of self to emerge. This can feel disorienting since we've been deeply conditioned to control everything and to desire predictability. But it is a normal and liberating phase of awakening to experience disorientation before reorientation. 4. Don't stop thinking. When you stop relying on thought-based knowing, you don't become dumb or ignorant. Instead, you move beyond the dualistic mind's limited way of knowing to a new kind of wisdom that is naturally available. Here are the 6 shoulds of the small self and the solutions from the interconnected self. 1. I should be the small self to know. How can I know if I don't think? The small self comes in with doubt and fear to say, you need to go to thought and know conceptually. Instead, there is a new, non-conceptual, not knowing that knows, a heart knowing that is prior to thought. Only when we stop trying to understand things through our dualistic thoughts will we start to receive a direct knowing that can come through a deeper connection to the space and silence of awake awareness. 2. I should be the small self to be safe. Who will keep me safe if I don't construct plans and protect myself with vigilance? We are drawn back to the parts-based identity to be safe. Instead, the ground of self provides a way to be safe without constantly scanning for danger. A new sense of safety emerges as we feel self beyond the stories of our lives, which is safer than we feel through the ego managers. As for day-to-day safety issues, our intuition shows us the way, and our thinking mind is still available for problem-solving when we need it. Another safety concern might come up in the mind's eye when we surrender into the gap of no self on our way to the greater freedom of self. The deeper level of the small self program is to avoid its own death. So the transition through egolessness or no self feels like who we are is threatened with non-existence. The best thing to do here is to know that this experience of no self as we release from the small self is normal, as is the fear, and they will both naturally pass as we emerge into something greater. 3. I should be the small self to avoid pain. We feel like we should return to the parts-based identity to avoid emotional and physical pain. Ironically, it is when we try to avoid pain that it turns into suffering. Our thinking mind often tries to rationalize away difficult emotions, physical sensations, or painful life events. Our small self does not have the capacity to live a fully intimate emotional human life because when living from the small self, we can often be avoidant of experience. From self-leadership, we can lovingly approach pain rather than fearfully avoid it. We can find an acceptance of the normal unpleasant experiences in life and release the suffering that we have about our pain. We operate from an awareness that is able to be with unpleasant feelings without pushing them away, and is able to be with pleasant feelings without clinging to them. Our inner intelligence can also distinguish between real danger signals, false alarms, and growing pains. 4. I should be the small self to function. We may feel that we should return to the parts-based identity to take actions and do things in the world. Indeed, the small mind and ego functioning are superb at certain tasks, such as problem-solving, planning, and other types of organizing. It is important to note that in growing from small self to greater self, we are not abandoning the small mind. We are no longer pretending that the small mind is what I am. Instead, I can use the thinking mind as a tool, among other tools to choose from. As we shift from parts-based identity to self, there is a rewiring that allows us to remain at home in heart-knowing and access information without going back to create a doer or small self. From here, we can respond rather than act. 5. I should be separate in order to have loving relationships with others. Individuation is indeed important as a developmental stage for human beings. To learn a sense of autonomy, to know boundaries, to be able to feel and ask for our needs. Moving from small self to interconnected self does not mean dissipating our boundaries, being a codependent personality that just gives in to everyone else's needs, or being too vulnerable to function in relationship. We keep the skills we have learned in our individuation process. We are simply including and transcending individual body-mind as the location of identity. We can keep our individuation as a location point in time and space, while we simultaneously operate as and from something much bigger. Another way we can get caught in the illusion of needing to be separate is if we believe that we are lovable specifically due to our small self. We feel like we should focus on our personality, our looks, and the way we act to be loved. In other words, in this case, we are still seeing love as conditional upon who we make ourselves to be. Instead, from self, we experience that love is who we already are. We are love, and we are lovable unconditionally. 6. I should try to improve the small self to become awake. This one is the trickiest obstacle, because it is difficult to notice when it is happening. This is when the small self grows up as much as it can and thinks that it is true self. Because the small self thinks it should become more developed and smarter, it is unwilling to let go in order to grow. When students say, "I can't do it," they are actually right. That I can't do it. The small self desperately screams, "Do not leave me. If I am not in charge, I will die." But this is not what will happen. While doing the job of the ego function, the ego managers have mistakenly taken on the role of identity. In awakening, they semi-retire from working the job of identity and return to their natural job of ego function. In terms of waking up and growing up, it is important to note that when the ego strengths, which were vital for our previous stage of development, form into ego identity, this acts as the main obstacle to the next stage of development and into true self. Living from self-leadership. We have believed ourselves to be the parts-based ego identity for so long that letting go to grow beyond it can feel like death. What is dying is the identity role that the manager parts have been playing. What is dying is the lens through which you viewed self and reality. However, this dying allows for a transition into what can also feel like rebirth. This kind of dying is like a seed that has to be buried underground to sprout through the soil and grow to its bigger nature as a tree. It requires a complete letting go, a release or surrender. This kind of surrender does not happen if we fight, push, resist, or exert too much effort. While the small self does go through a kind of death, it doesn't die if we try to kill it. Nor can it be fought or even improved into the interconnected self. It is important to respect that our ego managers are not our enemies. They have developed to protect us, and they have protected us when we needed them. They deserve honor, not destruction. What happens if we fight them, deny them, or try to shove them away? Most people who have tried to get rid of their egos have reported that the battle ends up strengthening the ego defenses, or creates a self-like spiritual ego manager. When this happens, our personality can become similar to that of a religious fundamentalist who is convinced of their beliefs but judges everyone else. The ego manager who now takes the role of spiritual know-it-all will still be holding a false sense of control and knowledge of how things are, without truly submitting to the don't-know mind or relinquishing the personal will in order for the natural flow of open-hearted awareness to guide our actions. These managers have not yet allowed for humility to leave space for the awakened self to be fully open to the unknown. The spiritual manager can also do a great job at keeping certain tendencies, like over-control or intellectualization, out of our awareness, blinding us to the areas of growth we need to integrate. While hearing about these spiritual traps and detours, it is helpful to remember that there are gradations of these tendencies rather than I have that or I don't have that anymore. Most of us undergo all of these processes to a certain extent. They are deeply wired in us. Transitioning out of our conditioned ways is an unfolding. Self rarely remains at the seat of our conscious awareness after the initial glimpse. The ego managers have established deep habits that prioritize safety and survival according to their programming, and their perceived need for safety continues to reconstitute ego defenses that obscure awake awareness. But these innocent habits of our old conditioning will gradually subside as a new connection to the ground of self and heart-knowing stabilizes. Because self naturally has qualities of acceptance, patience, compassion, warmth, and equanimity, we begin to have a baseline of these qualities at all times in a way that we didn't have before, and over time, that baseline grows stronger. For example, a student told me, "Nowadays I've noticed that no matter what is happening in my work or relationships, I feel good even when I don't feel good." Remarkably, we can experience an essential happiness regardless of what's going on in our daily lives. We feel an underlying well-being because self is not dependent on conditions or on the ongoing difficulties and delights of daily life. Peer inquiries. Awakening is not solely an individual journey. We all affect each other, making it a social and community endeavor as well. I've developed 6 peer inquiry practices that you can do with a partner, face-to-face or remotely. Each peer inquiry practice is its own individual set of questions, designed to help you access your true self and speak from self-leadership to another person. You can do one at a time or go through all 6 peer inquiry practices in a row. As you begin each peer inquiry practice, decide who will ask first and who will respond first. The person asking will ask the first question, wait for a response, then ask the second question, wait for a response, and so on, until the partner has responded to the last question. Then switch roles. Here are pointers for the process. Understand the words of the inquiry. Unhook awareness from thinking, and allow awareness to look back and know directly with awareness. From this new awareness-based knowing, let words arise and speak them without going to thinking. It is not so important what your answer is, but that you look with awareness and learn to speak and relate to another person from awareness-based knowing. Glimpse 1. Peer Inquiry Practice 1. 1. Who is hearing? 2. Where is the hearer? 3. What is here if there is no problem to solve now? Glimpse. Peer Inquiry Practice 2. 1. Tell me about what is aware without going to thought. 2. Tell me about that which is aware, which is beyond words. 3. What is aware of the six senses? 4. Does this awareness have a color, shape, or location? 5. What is it like if awareness knows the six senses from within? Glimpse. Peer Inquiry Practice 3. 1. When awareness drops below the neck and opens, what does this open-hearted awareness know? 2. What does the welcoming heart know? 3. Is this awake awareness an experience occurring to you, or is this who you are? 4. What is the relationship between awareness and any unpleasant feelings? 5. What is the relationship between awareness and beliefs and stories? 6. What is the relationship between awareness and the fear of death? Glimpse. Peer Inquiry Practice 4. 1. What is aware of movement and mental sensations? 2. Where is the I? 3. Is there anything missing or anything that needs to be pushed away? 4. Can you live from open-hearted awareness? Glimpse. Peer Inquiry Practice 5. 1. What is here before the I thought arises? 2. Is this awake awareness an experience, or is it me? Is it what is? 3. What does open-hearted awareness know? Glimpse. Peer Inquiry Practice 6. 1. Who is hearing? 2. Where is the hearer? 3. Where are we hearing from? 4. What is here, now, when there is no problem to solve? 5. Where are you aware from? 6. Tell me about the awareness that is knowing. 7. What does everything feel like as awareness energy? 8. What do you know from your heart? These peer inquiries can help make the transition from a passive stage of resting as awake awareness to rewiring, talking, and walking from open-hearted awareness. This can also build community. When you finish the series with each other, continue to talk about other things in your life from this new awareness-based way of knowing and relating. The goal is for all of us to awaken together and help others from our natural, compassionate motivation.